Good evening, photogs. My last few videos have been related to software and to photo editing. This month I decided to visit with you about photography technique. After all, it's spring and it's time to get outdoors and get those winter doldrums behind us. So, with that in mind, one of my favorite genres is night and low light photography. Taking that a step further, one of my favorite subjects is the Milky Way. Now, the disclaimer. This video is not intended to be for instruction. It is intended to introduce the concepts of Milky Way photography. It will not make you an expert at photographing objects in low light that are moving. My goal is to stimulate further learning and perhaps spark an interest for some who might be interested in trying something new. March is the beginning of the Milky Way season, which runs through about the first week of November. The absolute best time of month to view and photograph the Milky Way is during what's known as a new moon, or that period of time when there's no moon at all in the sky. The reason for this is the light from the moon is so bright that it overpowers the light that's emitted from the Milky Way. Additionally, light pollution from cities will wash out the Milky Way. That said, to see the Milky Way, you need to be about 30 miles from any city to avoid ground light pollution. Remember, the larger the city, the farther away you must be to avoid its light pollution. High humidity and dense cloud cover will also affect your ability to capture the Milky Way. Start looking at the weather forecast for your chosen shoot location about a week in advance. You want cloud cover to be 20 to 25% or less. No cloud cover is optimum, but a few clouds in your shot won't hurt. You also want low humidity if possible. Moisture in the air will cloud your photograph. I like to use an app called Meet Stargazers. It's an application for cell phones that's designed specifically for Milky Way and astrophotography. It has links to a standard roadmap as shown here. It's from Google. Vortal dark sky ratings. Cloud cover and meteorology by Meteo Blue. Other widgets. Astronomy weather, current location. Lunar and solar ephemerides, I use PhotoPills for that. And just for fun, the photograph of the day. For planning the date, I like to start with a lunar calendar like this one. I downloaded it from capturetheatlas.com. This lunar calendar is easy to use because of its color coding. Navy blue, nights that you shouldn't even consider the Milky Way. Light blue, nights that it's there but not quite as obvious. And pink and red, the nights that it's easily located because there's no moon at the same time that the core is above the horizon. Once I've arrived at a location, I move over to my favorite phone app, which is PhotoPills. Using the virtual night sky widget in PhotoPills, I can determine exactly where the Milky Way will be in the sky as it travels overhead based on where I'm standing. Let me show you. Once you've reached your location and you're ready to set up and you're looking for that exact perfect spot to set your camera and tripod, time to use PhotoPills to dial that in. Let's start PhotoPills now. And right now we're on the planner, showing me that we're on March the 19th. You can see that in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Let's scrub left to March the 18th, and the time that the Milky Way is going to be coming up and evident is about 2:30 in the morning. So let's go to roughly 2 o'clock-ish, 2:30, and let's go to augmented reality. It's at the bottom of the screen on second from the left, night reality, and you can see that orange dot in the center of the screen. That would be the Milky Way's core. The horizontal line above that is the indicated horizon, and that'd be my neighbor's house that you see over there. There's mine. And if I wanted to take a shot of the Milky Way with the core directly above my car, I would scrub right and left to make the Milky Way come up in the sky. And you can watch the time in the top left corner. That's Sunday morning, 3:19 a.m. I'm sorry, 3:19 at 2:18 a.m. And if I scrub right, I go backwards in time. If I scrub left, I advance in time. You'll see that the Milky Way goes above the horizon at about 3 o'clock. And now if I move my camera to the center of my car, you can see that the Milky Way is going to be above my car at about 5:19 in the morning. So now I know that I need to be right here, standing in this exact spot at 5:19 to get the picture that I want. That is just a tiny, tiny bit of the power of photo pills. From the example that you've just seen, you can tell that if you want to shoot the Milky Way early in the year, you need to be an early riser. Also, in the earlier part of the Milky Way season, the core tends to stay low in the horizon, and it can be photographed as an arch. From April to July, the Milky Way starts low on the horizon and then moves to a diagonal orientation. From August through the end of the season, late October, early November, it remains vertical in the sky. Now that you have an idea of where and when you intend to take your Milky Way photograph, let's talk about gear. We've already discussed how dark it's going to be where you're shooting the Milky Way. Even if you know your camera well enough that you don't need light for the settings and adjustments, you're still going to want to have some kind of light for safety reasons. Red is best as it doesn't affect your night vision. Don't run out and buy an expensive LED flashlight. Any small flashlight with a red balloon stretched over the end will work just fine. If you prefer, most cell phones have the ability to turn on a red flashlight or make the screen glow red. Let me show you. The flashlight that I have that came with my phone does not have the ability to turn red. I do, however, have an application on my phone. I keep it in my photography folder called Dark Light. You can download that and it turns into a red light for you. A camera. You're going to need a camera capable of manual settings and preferably one with interchangeable lenses. I'm not going to spend much time talking about specific cameras and features. Yes, some digital cameras are better than others for night photography, but at the end of the day, it's about having fun, not breaking the bank or having the best gear. Any digital camera will work with manual settings. The lens. A fast, wide-angle lens, generally 24 millimeters or wider with an aperture rating, the F number, of 2.8 or faster. Again, and this is for all you gear hounds out there, don't get hung up on expensive glass. The first Milky Way shot I ever took was with a crop sensor camera, the Nikon D7200, and a kit lens. Yes, the photos were noisy, but I captured the Milky Way and I had an experience that I will never forget. If you absolutely must shop for your first Milky Way lens and you're on a budget, I recommend the Rokinon f2.8 14mm manual focus lens. This lens has been around for years. Rokinon makes it for nearly every camera model and it's very affordable. As you can see at eBay, you can pick up a 14mm Rokinon for $185.91 used. This one is available from Robert's Camera. I can tell you from experience that they're a reputable dealer. They advertise legitimately what they're selling and you get what you pay for. I highly recommend them. In addition to them, if you wanted to buy a new lens, you can go to eBay where you'll find the exact same lens brand new for $400. Either way, it's a budget lens that performs admirably in low light. Now, this lens is manual focus, which makes it a little less handy during the daytime, but for Milky Way, we're manually focusing anyway, so that makes no difference. The tripod. If you have more than one tripod, bring the sturdiest one you own. You're going to be taking photographs at 15 to 20, perhaps 25 seconds, and you want your camera to remain absolutely still. To that end, a rock-steady, heavy-duty tripod is a must. You won't be using a telephoto lens, so a ball head should be sufficient. Remote shutter release. Use the 2-second timer on your camera or bring a shutter release. Pressing the shutter button on long exposures risks making your images blurry by shaking the camera. While a shutter release is not absolutely necessary, for me, It's faster and easier than setting up the camera's delayed response. Setting up. The subject. Find a subject for your Milky Way shot. Early in the season, the Milky Way will be in the south. Mid-season, it's going to be in the southeast. And southwest by September and October. In essence, south. Find a subject that faces south so that when you're looking toward the Milky Way, the subject will be in the foreground or below the Milky Way. Usually, rustic subjects like an old car or a barn will work well. A lake and its reflection is also a great subject to put in your Milky Way photo. It's best to look for compositions during the daytime. You won't be able to see details at night, so find what you're looking for in the day, and remember the night augmented reality widget in PhotoPills. Use it to zero in on your exact location just before you're ready to shoot. Settings. Everybody wants to know about settings. First of all, let's talk about the brightness of the LCD screen. The light from the screen on the back of your camera can and will affect your night vision. Find the setting for the LCD brightness and turn it as low as it will go. If your camera has the feature, turn the LCD on top of the camera to the dimmest setting as well. Not only will this help to not affect your night vision, but it will also enhance the quality of your shots. If you leave the camera's LCD screens bright, your images will look artificially bright. You'll think that you have them well exposed while you may be actually underexposed. Reducing your brightness at the LCD will give you a more realistic view of what your exposure looks like. It will also minimize the light disturbance to your friends who are shooting next to you. File quality. I strongly recommend shooting in RAW. Your camera will have much more dynamic range and you'll have better results when processing your photos. White balance. Depending on your personal preference, values between 3800 and 4200 Kelvin are usually a good starting point to capture the most natural colors in the Milky Way. You can leave the white balance in auto if you'd like. If you're shooting in RAW, you can adjust it later. But if you're stacking exposures, the white balance may change between those exposures. Auto will make it difficult to blend those multiple photos together later. Your aperture. Shoot your lens wide open at its widest aperture. You'll be shooting in the dark. You need all the light you can get, so shoot your lens wide open. ISO. Most modern digital cameras are capable of handling very high ISOs. Milky Way photos are shot at very high ISOs. If you have a full-frame camera, set the ISO between 3200 and 6400 to start, and then experiment based on the results. If you're using a crop sensor camera, start at 1600 to 3200 and again, experiment based on the results. Your exposure. While setting the exposure length, we're trying to balance two things. It's a very dark scene, so shooting at a longer exposure collects more light. The problem is the Milky Way moves. As it moves across the sky, the stars will streak if the exposure is set too long. A handy rule has been developed to approximate the maximum exposure length that you can shoot at without streaking stars. It's called the 500 rule. On a full-frame camera, take 500, divide it by the given focal length, and the result will be the number of seconds that you can shoot without star streaking. I use a 20mm lens. 500 divided by 20 equals 25. So theoretically, I could shoot for 25 seconds without streaking. Now, even at 25 seconds, with newer, higher megapixel cameras, if you pixel peep, there's going to be some streaking. That said, I usually shorten my exposures to 15 to 20 seconds. Crop sensor cameras have effectively more magnification. Hence, you can't shoot one of those as long as you can a full frame. Use the rule of 300 instead. The same 20mm lens on a crop sensor camera would be 300 divided by 20 equals 15. That said, 15 seconds for a maximum exposure on a crop sensor using the 20mm lens. Now let's talk about focus. The next thing to do is focus your camera. This is one of the most challenging things to do during low light photography. The challenge is that autofocus won't work in the dark. The infinity on most camera lenses is not particularly accurate. Therefore, you can't trust that setting to infinity will give you sharp focus. There are two reliable methods to focus to infinity in the dark. The first is to focus on something at infinity during the daytime. Carefully place a piece of painter's tape on the lens ring and then use a pen to make a note of where the infinity marker landed. Now you'll know where the actual infinity focus mark is. Be sure to turn the autofocus off to keep the setting. The other technique is done at night while setting up to shoot. Find a bright star or a distant light. Make sure that the lens is in manual focus. Magnify your camera to 100% and then manually focus until the star is sharp. Now the camera will be in focus. Be certain not to touch that focus ring again. Now I'll demonstrate the two techniques. Focusing to infinity during the daylight is relatively easy. If you'll take a look at the far telephone pole with the crossbars at the top of it, let me zoom in. That is the area that I'm going to focus on with the camera. I'm going to zoom back out again. If you'll take a look at the top of the camera, you'll notice that I have set a piece of painter's tape on my lens where the focus ring rotates, and I've made a mark where infinity is. Now let's take this, move the infinity mark away from the preset, and now let's take a look at the back of the camera. Set it on 100%. Move the camera over to where the area that I want to focus at is in the center of the screen. I have focus peaking turned on, which will make everything turn red that's in focus. If you'll notice, the focus peaking goes away, the focus peaking comes back, gets dim, comes back, and here at the bottom right hand side of the camera, the LCD, you'll see that the small dot there is solid and white. That shows that I'm in perfect focus. Now, leaving the focus ring set to manual, let's check and see if my exercise took me back to the same place where I was before. And it's exactly where it needs to be. Therefore, focusing during the day with a piece of painter's tape, I can go back to this at night, set those two marks to line up, and know that I'm in perfect focus. All right, I'm in front of my house. You can see that the camera set up to f1.4. I'm at ISO 250. I'm going to turn that up to 6400. The time is set to 15 seconds. And now I'm going to find a star and focus on it. Let's take us slightly out of focus. And manually we're going to choose a bright star. There's one right there. And I'm going to focus on that at 100% magnification. And I want to reduce the size of that until it's as crisp as it can be. It should turn red. Small as it will go, sharp as I can get it at 100% magnification. And now we've focused at night. And now a brief word from our sponsor, the Photog Event Coordinator Committee. Photogs, if you have not signed up as an event coordinator, we strongly encourage you to consider joining our team. Hosting a Photog event is one of the most rewarding things that you can do as a member of Photog. As an event coordinator, you will get to meet and associate with photographers who have the same desires and passions as you do. A host of friendships have begun at Photog events. Also, you'll get to know your subject matter more intimately while planning and hosting your event. Everybody knows that before you can teach a subject, you must know the subject. That's not to say that you have to be an expert. Knowledge of the basic skills that an event requires is all that's expected. Our Photog mission statement begins with, "The mission of Photog shall be to encourage, educate, and expand the art of photography." I vividly recall my very first Milky Way Photog event. It was at Tallgrass Prairie. The event was hosted by Larry Hall, and I was brand new to photography and in no position to teach what I didn't understand myself. Lisa and I were both working through settings that we didn't understand when Larry approached us and said, "Lisa, I see you're having trouble. What can I do to help?" Larry took Lisa under his shoulder. I listened and learned without them knowing that I was soaking up every word, and we ultimately had a terrific time, but we wouldn't have had it not been for Larry Hall taking us both under his wing. He, as an event coordinator, showed us exactly what the role is all about. Now, if you've already signed on as an event coordinator but you haven't hosted an event in a while, please remember that photography events are the lifeblood of our club. New and veteran members alike thrive on fellowship and learning with like-minded photographers. Help foster that learning environment by hosting an event soon. Let's fill that event calendar. Thank you.